I was drawn to publishing from this interdisciplinary, watching my friends do music and watching artists put their work up and stuff like that. I am really excited to be planning a party that will also be kind of interdisciplinary. And so instead of doing it at a bookstore, it will be kind of across multiple arts. So I'm hoping to have some live music. I'm hoping to have some visual art hanging. I'm hoping to invite the attendees to maybe, color in a step back or do a Mad Lib or something like that. And I'm definitely going to have cupcakes with the different book covers from the Prestons for people to eat.
Did you hear that? Oh, that's amazing. And I heard coloring a step back and I considered buying a ticket to New York, because that sounds amazing.
Welcome to Raising Baby Authors. I'm Cassia, your host and a brand new writer. If you feel overwhelmed and lost about this whole writing thing, you're certainly not alone. Join me while I pester my author guests for writing advice and find out how they do it. Because if they could, then why not you? It truly takes a village to raise an author, so let me share my village with you.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the second season of Raising Baby Authors podcast. I am very excited for this episode today because this is my first historical romance author in the season. Please welcome Katherine Grant. Katherine Grant writes award-winning Regency romance novels for the modern reader. Her writing has been recognized by Forward Indie's Book of the Year Awards, the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, Diverse Book Awards, and the Shelf Unbound Indie Book Awards. If you love ball gowns, secret kisses, and social commentary, a book hangover is coming your way. Katherine also hosts the Historical Romance Sampler podcast, a weekly show to introduce you to romance novelists. I've been a guest on that podcast, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. So welcome, Katherine.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to represent historical romance for this season.
Yeah, I mean, I always make sure to book some historical romance authors, but this season it has been sports romance, and I had a lot of new categories, but I was I kind of dropped the ball on the on the historicals a bit. I should really catch up. I'm really happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so I've read a really impressive bio just now. This was a lot of awards, and all of them indie, and that's amazing. I had no idea there are so many indie awards that are existing. So we're definitely going to talk about that. First, let's just to confirm. So you are fully an indie author. You don't have a traditional published books, or do you?
No, I'm fully indie. I've always been indie. I chose to write romance because, obviously I loved it. But part of the reason I decided to start publishing romance was so that I could be an indie author.
Okay. So, from where this kind of fascination with the indie side of the business?
Well, I've been writing since I learned to read. And in college, I studied creative writing. I did a lot of internships with literary agents. I dreamed of becoming a book editor for one of the big five. So I learned a lot about the traditional publishing world back then. And then I decided I didn't want to work in it. I wanted to focus on writing. So I moved to New York City and I was, building a life here with a day job and finding friends and stuff like that and writing in my spare time. And I was working on other projects that I was still querying, but I was kind of getting more and more frustrated that I wasn't able to put my art out in the world. I, got some short stories published in local literary magazines. I was putting my work in front of agents, but even if an agent said yes, then they would have to then put it in front of editors, and the editors would have to say, yes, we're going to invest in this. And the best case scenario is that 5 years later, maybe I would have a book come out. And one of the great things about New York City is you're surrounded by creative people. And I was really inspired by friends of ours who are musicians and actors and visual artists who just were finding these ways to put their art out even without commercial interest. We have friends who just have this kind of hobbyist singing group, and they'll rent out a theater on Broadway, not like a Broadway theater, but like the Duplex or Don't Tell Mama, these little small cabaret theaters, and put on shows. And I remember specifically after one of those shows feeling like I want to do that for my writing. And so that's when I began to think about self-publishing. And, I do have an interest in being somewhat commercially successful in making some money from my writing. And so I was already reading a lot of historical romance, and the fact that it is a genre where readers are open to trying indie authors. They're not really necessarily evaluating authors based on who's publishing them. They're open to getting more ebooks than paperbacks. All of that kind of conspired and made it a really appealing idea for me.
Okay, it is interesting because I don't know why I thought so, but I think I was somehow biased in thinking that it's historical romance where people appreciate the traditional authors more, and not even like the current one, and more of a like the Lisa Kleypas and the people who have been writing for decades. And yeah, I didn't know that there is such a big market for like self-published historicals. Even though I did have self-published historical authors on my podcast, it still didn't seem like it's as prevalent as in contemporaries, for example.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't studied the contemporary market that much, so I don't know how historical romance compares. I do think readers do love the traditional authors. There's room in their hearts for all of us, I would say.
Okay. So you did say you were writing like for a very, very long time. Was it always historicals or were you writing something else?
It wasn't always historicals, but that said, I've realized recently that like my origin really was historicals. I remember in second grade, we had like these journals and you had free writing time. And I was filling my journal pages with this story of an Irish immigrant coming to the United States. I don't think there was much of a plot, but that was what I as a second grader was writing about.
Seriously,
And
second grade.
then
My God.
yeah, I'm sure I was reading a book that, was I was kind of ripping off of. And then in third grade, I remember I was like, I'm going to write a whole book. And I started it based on the Great Depression, about a third grader living in the Great Depression. And again, I'm sure that in class we were learning about the Great Depression and they were asking us to like call our grandmothers and say like, what was your experience of the Great Depression? So like it was related, but I was very interested. And then in fifth grade, my dad was doing a lot of genealogy and he was like, well, why don't you write a story about our ancestors, Deborah and Ephraim Lindsay? Ephraim Lindsay went off to fight in the Revolutionary War. And so I remember I started a whole novel based on that. None of these were finished, but I think I've realized recently like that clearly I've been a history nerd and historical romance for a long time.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, it's not coincidental. You are definitely very interested in history because I'm pretty sure I studied, well, not the same things you studied because it's another country, but I don't remember ever wanting to write stories about that stuff. History was always boring to me. Okay.
Yeah, I was also reading it. We had a Dear America series, which was books for probably elementary and middle schoolers that were journals from like everyday people, and each journal was a different era in history. And then there was the American Girl dolls, and they all have their stories that are a specific era of history. I adored the author Anne Rinaldi, who wrote a lot of historical fiction for teenagers with strong romantic elements.
Wow.
So it also was what I was consuming.
Of course. Okay. Well, let's see. I usually ask about like the writing process from the beginning, but I need to know the context. So for, let's say, for how many years have you been publishing and how many books do you have, if you can remember?
I published my first historical romance January of 2020. So now it's about 5 years. It kind of depends how you count, how many books out. Do you count novellas? Do you count
I do.
anthologies? But I have 20 ISBNs, or like the like specific unit that bookstores
Mm-hmm.
use to list a title. I have 20 of those.
Okay. Well, that's impressive. The thing is, I want to ask how you started and how your, first draft looked when you just started writing with the intent of publishing, and then how it changed and how does it look now? Is it much faster? What what changed in your process?
So, writing with the intention of like self publishing my historical romances, I began with this theory that maybe I would enjoy it. I was kind of testing it out, like I think I want to do this business side, but creatively, is it going to be fulfilling for me? And so I kind of adopted the tech world concept of an MVP, or a minimum viable product. And it was autumn of 2019 when I started writing it. I think I wrote it in 6 weeks. I had a blast. And I was really just kind of getting out of my system all the things about historical romance that I'd been absorbing that were just like the fun, yummy tropes, without thinking too much about artistic intention or themes that I wanted to explore or anything like that. I was just seeing like, okay, my only prompt is historical romance. Can I do it and will I have fun? And I had a lot of fun. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to publish this. And so I got that out for January 2020. So that's pretty fast turnaround. And then it was like, okay, and what next? And how do I kind of move forward with a prompt that the prompt of write a historical romance or even write a Regency romance became too broad for me very quickly. I would say now when I'm developing stories, I'm thinking more about what's my artistic intention with this story. So, for example, my series, The Prestons, has 8 stories in it. And I set an artistic intention for the whole series that in each story, I wanted to try out a different flavor of stories that you find in historical romance. I wanted to have a mystery. I wanted to have something that was really Jane Austen inspired. I wanted to have something that was kind of quiet countryside. I wanted to have something that was very London based, partly because I was like, if let's just say that this is the only series I get to complete, I want to have explored all those different things and provide a series that is kind of completely encompassing the Regency period. And also, I'm still, I love to experiment as a writer. That's part of my creativity. So by giving myself that intention in each book, I've been able to kind of flex different muscles or explore different things, find out what I like, what I don't like. I love reading mysteries. I thought I was going to enjoy writing the mystery, and then it was just not my jam. So I've definitely learned from some of these experiments. And then I also have thematic things that I apply to my stories as I'm developing them. So again, for the Prestons, overall, the series question is kind of like when you're someone with privilege, like an aristocratic family, and you're aware of it and you want to be a responsible citizen in the world, what does that mean? How do you live through principles? What are the quandaries that you might come up against? And just kind of generally like, what does it mean to try to be a good person who has privilege and you want to share the wealth, literally and figuratively? And for each book, that there's a like kind of a descending question about that because each character has a different relationship to it.
Okay. So I'm just wondering to try tie into the question of like the writing itself. So you are planning the themes, you are planning kind of the tone of the book, what you want to explore there. Do you plot the whole book or do you just like write with the vibes?
I tend to write an overall outline that is kind of like key scenes throughout the whole book. And I tend to have more of a vision for the first act when I'm beginning, but then I try to kind of like be like, okay, and then that will lead consequentially to this. But by the time that I'm actually drafting, the outline kind of loses its relevance usually. Something has changed or I've realized something didn't work. I really relate to, I believe it's Elmore Leonard who talks about the metaphor of you're driving on a highway and you can see at night. You're driving on a highway at night and you can see the headlights. You can see the road as far as the headlights are illuminating. And you know that there's a road beyond that. And as your car keeps going, you're illuminating that road, but you can't at any time see beyond what the headlights are doing. That really resonates for me, where, I know that ultimately I'm going to get to Boston, but right now I can only see that I'm coming up on the exit to, I'm trying to think of a town in Connecticut, Hartford.
Okay. Yeah, town in Connecticut is actually a really nice coincidence because I've just been researching them yesterday because I need a town in Connecticut for my next release, but I need like a fictional one.
Oh,
And I was looking at all the actual names to try and like twist it into something else. Okay. All right. So I think one of my biggest, not fears, but like one of the things that I really hate to do is today, for example, I wrote a scene that was like 800 words. And then while I was finishing those 800 words, I realized that it would be much better if that other character walked in the middle of the scene and like the direction of the conversation would have changed. And I'm like, I'm going to have to cut out like 400 words from here. So this kind of approach when you're just like doing a little bit and by little bit, does that prompt like a lot of editing afterwards? Do you have to really bought your manuscript for that?
I was afraid that I'm going to. Like, as I'm doing my first draft, I am always like, it's going to take me like 3 months to edit this because it's terrible. And then by the time that I finish it and then I reread it, I realize that no, I did know what I was doing. And it's just that I got disconnected from what I had already done. But that said, there are definitely scenes where I rewrite them. In my book, The Viscount Without Virtue, there's a really pivotal scene where the hero and the heroine are both confronting a third person. And I could not decide whose point of view that needed to be from. Who generally I try to go with like who's the most vulnerable. That's the person whose point of view it's from. But I really couldn't just figure out who was the most vulnerable in that moment and how best to get information across to the reader. And so I think I wrote that scene from each of their point of views multiple times until finally, I don't even remember where I landed on it. I probably split it, but I rewrote that scene so many times just to figure out who was thinking what, who was feeling vulnerable about what, and what makes it the most effective scene. So I don't get too precious about, oh, I've written X number of words and they need to go. Um, because, I started writing historical romance in 2019, but I've been writing novels. I finished my first full novel when I was 12. So the practice of writing a full story and then revising it, giving it to people for feedback, getting feedback, pulling it apart, deciding, no, you know what? I need to rewrite the entire thing because that will make it better. One time my laptop died and I lost the entire manuscript because it was 2007 and we didn't have backup drives and stuff like that. And so I had to rewrite the whole story. I mean, I think I was like 30% through, but I had to rewrite a significant amount. All those things have taught me that word count is like the least important part of the process. It's figuring out who your characters are and what matters to them and what matters to the story and what matters to the reader. And so if you've written 800 words and you have to scrap some of them, that's great because you've learned something.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It still hurts, but I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am realizing like with the last release uh that's releasing like in a couple of days. It was like a dream. I just wrote it super quickly and I almost didn't edit it. It was like it was like 26,000 words. It was really, really fast. With this one, I'm like, okay, it's also gonna be 25,000 words. And then that makes you kind of logically think about where things should happen. And then I come
Mhm.
to 10,000 words. There's still no kiss. 12,000 words, they're still not kissing. I'm like, what's what? Either I'm gonna ruin all the rules of romance, or it's gonna be way longer. Like, okay, maybe my timeline that I set for myself for 25,000 words is not gonna really work out. Thank God I have time still. I still have time until October, but it's kind of going weird this time. And I really like what you said about choosing a POV. You said you are choosing whoever is the most vulnerable. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I found it actually one of the most complicated things now. My first one was in one POV, and now I'm writing two. And every time I'm like, did I choose the right POV here? If they are both in the scene, I have to think about things that if they are talking and getting to know each other, I need to know whose thoughts I need to see in this scene more. Who's revealing more, who has more to say, sort of like who is hiding more in their heads. Or the
Mhm.
other way around. It's always like, do I need to reveal this now or should I just leave this person out of the POV for him or her to say something very subtle and then later discover, or they will say something very subtle and we'll hear in their thoughts what's happening. It's so hard. It's really hard.
Absolutely. It is. And that's I do often end up rewriting a scene to see if it's better from the other character's point of view or chopping it. I really think about a scene structure, my ideal scene structure. Not every single scene does this, but I think effective scenes generally, whoever's point of view it is, by the end of the scene, they've had a slight change. Something
Hmm.
has propelled them into a different state of mind or propelled them down their character journey. And so that that's kind of where the vulnerability comes in and what is their journey and how would this scene impact that journey?
Yeah, that's very important. I think that's a great observation. And also for me, in the like the two POV situation, when the scene ends and someone whose POV it is thinking something, yeah, there's some change, maybe some doubt or whatever. And then you switch to a new POV and then you get a completely like different like you thought something on one page and then the new truth is revealed on the next page. That's like the best, because what you
Mhm.
thought or what the other character thought was actually not the case. And I actually ended up writing a couple of scenes, not for this book, but for the other one, a couple of scenes in both POVs as well. And that's, I wanted just to, that's the fault of this baby. This book kind of, it gives you like exercises of writing the pivotal moments in your characters' lives that happened before all the action happened. And my book, the long one, happens to be a second chance. So there's a lot that happened between the two characters before the actual action happened. And I have about 12 scenes to write from two POVs just to try to understand them. This is terrible because it's not going to end up in the book. It's a lot of words to write to not end up in the book, but it's a very cool exercise. I'm loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's where the art versus the commercial part of it comes in because the artistic process, those words are not wasted. But in terms of your time and getting a book to market, you can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm spending all this time writing and none of it's going to make it into the final product.
Yeah. Actually, about the publishing process, for you, do you have like a specific schedule? Do you set yourselves these deadlines that, okay, I have to release by this, and then the next release is going to be 3 months after or something? How do you plan?
I don't respond very well to deadlines in that, like in college, when there were deadlines, I would always finish the paper a week early. And so if I set myself deadlines or if I have an editor that has a deadline, it stresses me out more than necessary because I'm going to get it done no matter what. But then I'm stressing out and I'm trying to get it done even earlier than the deadline. So I don't set very specific deadlines. I generally every year set out a business plan and I think about what is realistic for me to put out, and then I kind of try to, like, figure out when it will be done. It's less from a business perspective of if I have a release every other month, then I'll make X amount of money, and more from a, I need to know when I have this draft done, it's gonna go to my developmental editor. Are they gonna be available? And then is it gonna go to my copy editor? Excuse me. And then will my copy editor be available? And then what about my cover designer? And so lining up everybody's schedules is more of the planning that I do. But like for example, my book, The Widower Without a Will, I just decided to commit last week to the actual release date. So it's the end of August. It's coming out October 17th. I probably could, I like knew that was probably going to be the release date for like this whole year. But I was just like, I don't want to commit to it because what if something happens? What if I change my mind? What if I want to do a complete rewrite? So I guess the luxury of self-publishing is that I don't have to have a 6 month lead up to a release.
Yeah, that's also something that mostly is driving my writing as well. Like, I know that I've set a deadline for editing with an editor like 2 months ago. They were like, yeah, okay, let's set this date. Let's see if you can make it by that date. If not, we're going to consider something else. I think the hardest part so far for me has been the cover design. Somehow I feel like I have to do it even earlier than the editing. Like, I'll be writing the first draft and I already need to have the conversation and the draft going about the cover, actually.
Mm.
Okay, you mentioned that like you write and publish historical romance since 2020, but you've been writing novels since forever. So what were those novels about?
Okay, the first one that I finished was my version of Ella Enchanted.
Okay.
Yeah, so I loved the book. And my version, I think, had no magic. I removed the magic from the world. So I kind of made it a historical romance. Then I wrote a sequel for that. And then I wrote something that was very historical romance adjacent, but defies categorization because it was just a 15-year-old writing in her bedroom. I tried a mystery. I wrote something that would probably be called contemporary romance, but again, I wasn't writing to market. I was just writing for myself. When I was in college, I was more seriously thinking like, okay, maybe I can get something published. It's worth mentioning that maybe it's worth mentioning. I'll mention. I was studying creative writing at Northwestern University. I was a freshman when Veronica Roth was a senior and sold Divergent. And so there was this sense that even though I'm a freshman in college, I could be the next bestseller. And
Yeah.
I got to meet Veronica Roth and had a writing date with her one time and have interacted with her. I certainly don't know her, but she was very nice and gracious and down to earth. But so in college, I was writing, I would pitch myself as like a Jodi Picoult-esque writer I was writing a lot of contemporary fiction that was trying to take on serious issues with strong romantic elements. But I don't know that it was really coming from my heart. I think it was more that I thought that was what people should be writing or what the expectation was. My writing program was very literary focused, and so they didn't even want us to be thinking about getting published. They didn't offer any training on how to get an agent. They wanted you to focus on writing like Raymond Carver or Flannery O'Connor or George Saunders, and that wasn't exactly my jam. So I would say in creative writing, in getting my creative writing degree, I certainly learned a lot about writing. I learned a lot about the life of being an artist, but I also kind of got disconnected from my original passion for writing. And so it took me a while after graduating to get back in touch with myself as a writer. I did a NaNoWriMo book that I was querying for a while. And again, that was like a contemporary fiction thing. And then I found historical romance. And that was kind of when I reconnected with the little 12-year-old in me who had said, Ellen, Enchanted would be better if there was no magic.
So you said you found historical romance. Does that mean you didn't read it before? How did you discover it?
I did not read it before I was in my 20s. I don't know exactly how I discovered it. I don't really remember, but I was living a day job life in New York City with a lot of commuting, and so I think I would be like checking out books on my e-reader from the library. And I believe I started with Mary Balog, and she was certainly the one who drew me in. I loved the kind of quiet, calm world that she creates and that the characters are very her scenes don't actually have to be about anything. There's just a lot of emotion whirling around, and that's something that I've always loved. One of my
Hmm.
favorite authors who's not historical romance when I was in college was Elizabeth Berg, and I remember that she could like write a whole scene that was just someone setting a dinner table and there was so much tension, but like there's literally no one else in the room. The person is just like putting forks down and thinking about what that means to them. So Mary Ballag pulled me in, and then at some point I found Courtney Milan, and that was when I really was like, oh, wait a second. Historical romance can do some really interesting things. It's not just, quiet emotions that are suspended from reality. It can be interacting with our world too, thematically.
Yeah, that's how a lot of people discover it. I was just, yeah, we've talked about it. I was just so surprised that there is such a thing as historical. I had no idea that it's even existing. Okay, while you were talking about getting your degree and having the creative writing classes, I had one question in my mind. They don't prepare you, they teach you how to write well in terms of like literary quality, but they don't prepare you for publishing. So what is the goal for them? They teach you how to write well to what?
I'm not sure I ever got a real answer. I have, as I've, become more of a full-time writer and become older and wiser, I have come to appreciate some of the things that they were telling us or feeding us about how, like going back to like having an artistic intention for my books. Like that actually has really helped me feel like I have a longevity to my series and to feel really connected to it and all of that. I think their goal was to remove the ego from the writer who wants to get published, who wants to have a career in this, and to really say, no, only focus on the art. I remember to graduate, there was a required class that was called something like Living as a Writer, or maybe it was The Writer's Life, or it was something that I thought was going to be here's how, now that you couldn't take that class until you had finished your year of actual creative writing. So now we've done that. We've written our theses. Now we're going to tell you how you might try to get published or whatever. But it really wasn't that. It was just like essays from various writers and poems and stuff like that about the disconnect between art and commercial success. But in ways like again, like I didn't really understand what they were sharing there until I've had this lived experience a decade later. I don't know exactly that that's what they would say their goal was, but that's my takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand focusing on the art. However, I mean, everything has, you don't go to get a degree just to have a degree. You kind of want to apply it, right? So, and you pay money for it. So it has to end up in something. And even if you're super focused on your art, it's the art eventually, when it's for you, it's good. But eventually it is for people to see, to read, to listen to. And that's when publishing becomes super important. Okay.
Yeah, I was very frustrated as an undergrad and as a leader of some of the writing groups. I was leader of two different writing groups because that's how involved in writing I was. I brought in published authors to talk about their journey, and I brought in agents to talk about how do you query and stuff like that. So we students were like, can't you give us a little bit more on like, okay, we're going to graduate, then what? But I think the ivory tower idea was, at least back then, very relevant.
All right. Well, fair. I have no idea about any of that, so I can only speculate and judge from wherever I am. So, anyway, okay. So you did mention that you chose a historical romance because you wanted to get published, and you knew that it's gonna give you it potentially can give you success if you publish in the historical romance genre. Do you ever consider that you could pivot to something else?
Well, I think about it because people keep saying that historical romance is dead.
I don't know where that's coming from, really. I don't understand.
Well, I think traditionally published authors have concretely been told, they're not going to get renewed contracts for their historical romances and write something else instead. I don't know about indie. I'm still building my business, so I am not at a point where I've seen a loss of business because of exchange in readership, but perhaps my potential readers are disappearing. I don't know about that. I don't have an innate interest in pivoting at this moment anyway. At one point, I thought maybe I'll write historical mysteries, but then I tried out my mystery novel and I hated it. So I feel pretty locked into historical romance from where my artistic happiness comes from. But, life is long. I hope to be doing this for a long time if I'm lucky. And so who knows where this could go. But at the moment, I'm sticking with historical romance.
Well, yeah, you have a podcast to show for it as well. Well, tell the listeners a little bit of how you came up with the idea of the podcast.
Yeah, so on the historical romance sampler, the podcast format is that an author reads like 10 minutes of their work and then we talk about that work and their careers and stuff like that. And I think for as long as I've been publishing, I've kind of been looking for ways to do more reading style events and share your work that way and also have some longer form conversations about our writing. I know that I spend a lot of time thinking about my stories, and there's a lot more to my intentions than necessarily comes across on the page. And it often feels that we are limited to like Instagram or TikTok level conversations about superficial things like tropes and book boyfriends and stuff like that, which is all fun. But I just was like, I think there's more out there, and I think we're doing more as authors. And what if we had more conversations about, what drives us to write and what we're trying to do with our books? And I have learned from doing the podcast. I think now I've interviewed over 75 authors. I've been amazed at how different each of us is in how we come to the page, in what inspires us, in what hooks us to historical romance or to the story. And it has really given me a deeper appreciation for all the weird creative things going on in historical romance that when you're just thinking about, okay, this is another book about a duke, you kind of miss all the little nuances that makes it unique.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I am also thinking about these kinds of things often. I definitely did not interview 75 people yet. It's way less, but I think it's been what, I don't know, 20 something at this point. And every time it's like a new conversation is a new type of knowledge, new type of perspective, and everybody's doing their best, and everybody has their own, not even a strategy, but just like a philosophy of how they write and how they publish. Each one of them is valid, and I take kind of note of everything from one author. Oh, I should do something like this the same way they do, or I should be doing that other thing. Oh, I should try Pinterest. They're trying Pinterest. And it's like, it's nice to connect. It's nice to talk about like the common interests you have, and just to learn from others. I especially love talking with historical romance authors because I think I would really love to write one, but I don't think I'll ever get the courage to do that.
You can do it. I want you to.
I definitely think I can plot one. Writing the line level writing that is in historical romance is something that I love. Like I have historical books where I have half the book highlighted in quotes, but with the thought that, my God, I can never write this. It's like, no, this is so beautiful. I don't even know how to put these words into one sentence. But anyway, it's just, yeah, it's something that I really hoping maybe one day to do. Okay, I think maybe it would be time to talk about, like we talked, you republished about 20 books and you have won 5 awards. I don't know. I've seen like, I've read them out. There was like about 5 awards in there. So how do you find them? How do you apply? Do you have some sort of goal with the awards?
Yeah, in my first couple of years as an independently published author, I was focusing a lot on submitting to awards, in part because when you don't have a publisher behind you and you're just relying on reader reviews, you really need something to kind of give. I was looking for something besides a publisher that would give me validity or like a third party like stamp of like, yeah, we recommend reading her books. So there are a lot of award programs out there. The kind of behind the scenes thing about award programs is like it's kind of pay to play. You know, you have to pay to submit. Even I have a friend who works in children's TV media, and even for the Emmys, they pay to submit their stuff to the Emmys. I don't know why I always was like, well, some great criterion board at the Emmys is saying that was good television. I'm going to
Yeah, yeah.
award that. But actually, you have to submit your own stuff. You have to pay to submit it, and then you have to hope that, it makes it through. So the part that I can control is finding these awards and submitting to them. And the part I can't control is, do I make it? So of course there are awards that aren't listed that I submitted for that I didn't make it. And a lot of those awards that are listed, I'm a finalist or in the short list. So you still get to say that you're an award winner, but I'm not like the gold medal award winner, just to keep things real here. But I mean, it has been wonderful to win those awards. I remember getting a notification about one of them. I don't remember which, so I think it was the National Indie Excellence Awards, or maybe it was the Next Generation. I got one of them on my birthday one year, and that was just
Mm.
like such a great little birthday present to know that somebody, the judges, read it and thought that it was worthy. And particularly because romance can be a competitive category, that has been rewarding.
Oh, definitely. Romance is crazy competitive. Yeah. I'm definitely looking up all of those awards after the episode because I don't think I've heard about any of them. I've heard, Olivia Fleur was with me last season. She was talking about the Ruby Award, but I think that was one is mostly for
I think that might be
historicals.
Australia.
Yeah, probably just
I
Australian
in
as well.
in the United States, there used to be really competitive and meaningful romance book awards that were related to the Romance Writers of America organization. That organization like had this huge implosion in December 2019, January of 2020, which is when I was just beginning to publish. So I was never like a part of it, and I have kind of stayed away from whatever has it remains from the rebel because it just seems kind of chaotic to me, which more power to people who are, involved in the romance community. But so those awards, there was this awards, and then now there's kind of like a vacuum of romance awards. And so instead of focusing on awards that were like it's a romance specific awards program, I just focused on awards that are for indie publishing books in general. And I would say, at a certain point, I was like, gosh, it's embarrassing to have all these awards in my bio. But like, I've kind of gotten to the point where budget wise, it's not a priority for me anymore. But, every award is a little ego boost.
And it gives you like the right to not the right, you can write whatever you want on your cover, but like it gives you the moral right to write award-winning author on your covers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've discussed the writing, we discussed the publishing. Since you did mention that you kind of still building your business, it's been like what 5 years for now. Do you have any marketing strategy or like the marketing methods that you rely on?
I don't feel like I've cracked the code. I feel like anytime I'm like, oh, this marketing thing is really working for me, then something changes and it stops working. I think it's a slow build for me to recoup what I've invested in the books, particularly my later books. I've invested more in cover design and editing and like all these things. But yeah, marketing wise, I kind of focus on content marketing. I'm big on that I have a whole podcast that's content marketing. I focus on my website. I think a lot of authors don't pay a lot of attention to their websites, but that is your home on the internet and it's the thing that you can control. And so I come from a corporate digital marketing background. So from the beginning, like I focused on SEO because that's something that I really understand, which is search engine optimization. And then in terms of social, I've just kind of embraced the part that I understand, which Instagram comes naturally to me as a consumer. I get it and I enjoy being on there. So I've just kind of try to adopt a sort of set it and forget it on Instagram where I have specific types of posts that I do. I post every day and my strategy is basically like I'm posting the things that I wish bookstagrammers were posting about my books. I'm posting quotes and reviews and little things that highlight the stories, but I try not to spend too much time on that. And then newsletter wise, again, I go back to content marketing. I do a lot of research for my books. And at a certain point, I wanted to be sharing all of that research. And then it was too much to go into an author's note. And so I started having research deep dives on my website, but they're only available if you subscribe for my newsletter. And so that's a little hook, hopefully, to incentivize people to sign up. And then I do two newsletters a month, one that's like monthly updates and one that is my research deep dive. That the research deep dives, I often actually get people replying and saying, oh, that was so interesting. And my copy editor was out in the wider world talking to somebody. I don't know how exactly it came up. Probably she was referencing me as a client. And they said, oh, Katherine Grant, I love her research deep dives. So that was really cool and validating to me that, they resonate with somebody.
Yeah, because you definitely put a lot of work into that. You have to write the whole articles about stuff. That's what's
Yes.
really stopping me from like blogging and stuff because I know that it's good to be blogging on your website, but I just can't find time with everything also to write a whole ass article. So I'm like, yeah, I'm still considering it, but yeah. But also you do like that would be my next question. I remembered all of your research book of the week that you do on Instagram as well. So these are like little snippets of the articles that you write, right?
The research book of the week is actually like a little different. It's literally just I'm highlighting a book that I've read that's a research book, and some of them become research deep dives, and some of them are just like I read this. Yeah, that's fun too. I kind of started doing that. First, I was doing it on TikTok, and then I have kind of decided TikTok's not for me. But I it's part of what I'm doing in my life, and I was kind of like, maybe people would be interested that I just read this really weird library book. And so I just started sharing.
Okay. Well, in relation to that, like how much research do you do for each of your books? Is it always the same or some of them take more?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the book and like what I'm trying to do with it and what I'm writing. For my mystery-based book, The Governess Without Guilt, I ended up doing so much research because, well, she's a governess, and so I wanted to get that right. And there is actually a fair amount of research out there. So I could read a lot about governesses. And then her love interest is not titled. He is he's upper middle class, but he's a working guy. He's an accoucheur, which is what they called basically like OBGYNs back then. So he's helping
Oh,
care for
okay.
women in their pregnancy and bring the babies into the world. And so then that took me down a lot of rabbit holes because I wanted to get his job right. And then I had this mystery that was all about counterfeiting money. And so then I wanted to understand how did they counterfeit money back then? And it turns out in the Regency period, it was actually a very specific time period where during the Napoleonic Wars, the British government suspended using gold. And so they were issuing a lot of paper money. And so there was a lot of forgery and fraud going on. And so then there was just a lot to kind of wade through to find the information that I was interested in. So for that book, I spent, I think, like a couple of months researching before I even started writing. But for
Wow.
most of my books, I kind of start doing the research while I'm working on the previous book. And usually I only have like one or two, maybe three things. For The Widower Without a Will, which is my book coming out in October, that one was relatively light in research because it's wrapping up this series. And I wasn't so focused on interacting with specific things going on in Regency England. I was more focused on interacting with the world I've already created and the characters and the yeah, like the character dynamics that need to be wrapped up. So I did a little bit of research on Bath because it's a setting in the book.
Hmm.
I did a little bit of research on like what was going on in the year that it's set in, and that's kind of threaded through. I did research on the heroine is the widow of a rector or like a minister from the Anglican Church. And so I did research on what would her life have been like, but it was relatively light research wise.
Yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking that if I ever decide to write historical romance, this would be when I'm going to break my teeth because I really, the research is just scaring me. I have to, when I have to get away from writing and do some Googling, that's already hurting my brain. Even though I'm a researcher, my job, I'm an IT researcher. So I read tons of papers and everything. And maybe that's why I don't want to do it for fun as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, let's talk about a little bit about author goals. I'm not sure if that's a goal, but like, what are the things that you want to happen in your author career that you would consider to be, oh, yes, this is author goal for me?
That's a good question. I've done a lot of thinking over the years of what does success look like for me or what would I like to have happen. For The Widower Without a Will, I am committed to throwing myself a launch party because that is something that I've always wanted and I haven't been able to justify before. So, having a launch party, ideally having some readers show up, that would feel really cool. I think moving forward, like if I can get to a point where I maybe participating in more bookstore events or just generally being part of a larger conversation and of historical romance, that would be cool. Um, I feel most fulfilled when I hear from a reader who has been moved by my book in some way. And so my ultimate goal is just to like, reach more readers who might be moved by my books. But yeah, I would say I actually have pretty modest. I don't really want to I had a TikTok go slightly viral where I was saying that I don't want my books in an airport bookstore. And people were like, that's really snobby of you. And why wouldn't you want your books in an airport bookstore? But I feel like that's just not something I want to put my energy towards. I don't necessarily feel like I need to be in front of every single person in the world or every single reader in America. I just would like to be I guess I would like to be well known enough in the historical romance readership that people have an opinion on me.
Yeah, that sounds like a very solid, nice goal. Doesn't matter what they think, but they would have an opinion. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
ideally, I would like them to say, "Oh, I read it. It didn't work for me, or it did work for me, and here's why." It's like in an
Mhm.
ideal world, most people it would work for them, but it's just like to be well known enough for people to have some sort of opinion. That'd
Yeah,
be
of
nice.
course. And I definitely I understand your point on the like the airport thing. It's not about you not wanting it. It's more like it would be nice if they were there, but it's not something you want to set as your goal and work towards. So that's perfectly valid. If it happens, it happens, but if this is not something you're dreaming about, then that's totally okay. All right. Related to that, my new favorite question to all of my authors, you have too many books. Let's focus on the last one, the one that's coming out in October. Since we're in October, what is the thing that you're most proud of about this book?
Hmm. This is the book that's closing the Prestons, and it's also when I was developing the Prestons, one of the first books I knew would happen in the series. So I've really been working on it subconsciously for 4 years. So I'm really proud of it because I feel like it's the execution of the whole series. I'm like so glad that I've been able to do it the way that I wanted to and that I've gotten to the end. And I'm proud of this story itself, but also, my developmental editor and my copy editor and some of the other people who've read advanced versions of it have said that it's a satisfying series close. And I felt a lot of pressure for the first time to be like, this is closing this series and I want this to feel really satisfying. So I'm very proud and I hope that other readers find that to be true. That it wraps up the thematic elements, the emotional elements, and delivers a satisfying, steamy read while doing so.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I feel like it's gonna be so hard to start a new series after finishing. Yeah, it must be just like abandoning the whole world and coming up with a new one.
Well, yeah, I feel it's very bittersweet because it's kind of been my safe place this whole time. And so I feel sad to not have the Prestons to return to. There's a larger world associated with them, the Northfield Hall novellas, that will keep going. But then, yeah, my next series, I've been thinking about it for a while now, for a year or two. And I've been currently doing like a lot of research for it. But I do feel like, oh, I'm not quite ready to start writing it. I need to kind of linger in the Prestons for just a little bit longer.
And so for this new release, of the last book, you mentioned you're gonna have a launch party. Do you have any details on that so that maybe the listeners who want to join will know where to go?
I don't have a venue locked down yet. There are two that I'm talking to. So I'm hoping that it's going to be the same day as release day, October 17th. I'm in New York City, so it's going to be here. I'm 99% sure it's going to be here in Queens, in Western Queens, on either Long Island City or Astoria or backup Sunnyside, which is where I live. And yeah, because, I was drawn to publishing from this interdisciplinary watching my friends do music and watching artists put their work up and stuff like that. I am really excited to be planning a party that will also be kind of interdisciplinary. And so instead of doing it at a bookstore, I am hoping that wherever I end up doing, it will be kind of across multiple arts. So I'm hoping to have some live music. I'm hoping to have some visual art hanging. I'm hoping to like invite the attendees to maybe, color in a step back or do a Mad Lib or something like that. And I'm definitely going to have cupcakes with the different book covers from the Prestons for people to eat.
Did you hear that? Oh, that's amazing. And I heard coloring a step back and I considered buying a ticket to New York, like, because that sounds amazing. Okay,
All right, well, I'll have to make that happen.
because when I asked, I imagined for some reason, like I've seen so many virtual launch parties that's what I imagined first thing. Like I thought you're gonna go into a Facebook group and just, mingle with the readers there. You're gonna take over or something like that. But yeah, an in-person event and in New York, that does just sounds like a dream. Really, I really hope everything works out for you and it's gonna be a great launch party. Don't forget to like post on Instagram about it. I'm gonna be sharing the hell out of it.
Thank you. I will, and I'll also let you know if it falls through and you should delete it. But I'm hoping. I literally like I'm waiting for a venue to tell me when I can come tour it. So
Of course, of course. Let me know. Everything can be edited. Okay, so before we close, the mandatory question, writing advice, best writing advice and or worst writing advice that you've ever heard.
I think okay, how to say this? I think there's a lot of writing advice that goes around, and some of it's good and some of it's bad. And what it comes down to is everybody is different and writes differently. And so, what I took away from getting a degree in creative writing is don't pay attention to writing advice. Pay attention to what you like to read. Feel free to try to mimic that as you figure out your voice. And then also learn how to get feedback and learn how to know whether the person giving you feedback is the right person to be giving you feedback.
I think that's the hardest because as you wrote something, you're very vulnerable. And when you hear someone tearing up your writing, you never know if that's like subjective or objective.
Right. And, I creative writing degree is a workshop based degree. And so the whole concept is you bring writing to the group and then you're not allowed to speak. You just sit there and let them discuss it and talk about what works or what doesn't work. And there are some really valid critiques of that process out there, but I think I did learn how to suspend my own defenses. I certainly
Mhm.
still have emotional reactions, but I've learned to just like be like, okay, I'm feeling emotional about that, but tomorrow I'm going to be able to hear that. And then realize, oh, that guy's never read a romance before. So when he's telling me there's too much kissing, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But this person, she really vibes with my character, but she's projecting herself onto it, or she's working through that in her story. And so, you know, learning what everyone's agenda is, not that they're manipulatively coming with an agenda, but they have something else going on. You have to learn what their filters are.
For sure, for sure. I've only been in a writing group for about, I don't know, half a year, I think. I'm not there anymore because I just don't have the time. But I remember this, like I understood that every every member of the group is basically judging my writing from the perspective of how they would write what I was writing. So I've been told that my scene has no depth, and then which was hurtful, but okay. I mean, I'm not writing a philosophical anything. I do want it to have depth, but I don't really care about too much about that. And then I've read the stuff that the guy who told me I had no depth, what he wrote, which was very beautiful and seemed to carry a lot of meaning. But then eventually nothing happened in the scene. It was nice, and I was reading. It's like, oh, okay, this is cool, and then it went nowhere. So we all we look to others' writing from the perspective of what we are good at, and we think people are bad at it. But then eventually it all reverses. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to be finding feedback and to understanding how other people see your work, and just try not to be offended by it. I definitely just said a lot of things that were not grammatically correct at all, but
That's
I think
fine.
it's 9 p.m.
It made a lot of sense. It made sense to me, so you're fine. Yeah. No, I
Okay.
mean, we see that in reviews as well. I've had in one book, like magazine reviewed it and said that there was no depth to the characters, and then all the other reviews on Goodreads said that the characters had a lot of depth, and I was just like, this is why reviews are
Yeah.
not the place for authors to get feedback.
Yeah. Do
Just
you
stay
read your
out of it.
reviews? Do you read your reviews generally?
I only read them for marketing purposes. Like I have to elevate reviews in order to sell my books. And so
Mm-hmm.
I do see them then. So I tend to see them during my release week and it's terrible. But then I don't have an ongoing urge to go check. They're just everyone's. And this was something that I got to when I listened to a podcast give me a 5-star review and I listened to their in-depth conversation about it and it still bummed me out. And I was like, well, okay, this was like the best case scenario. Obviously, I want someone having like a long conversation about how much they loved my book. Why am I bummed out? And I realized that it's because the book as it is published is just a small part of the book as it is in my head. And the book
Yeah.
that is read is just a small part of whatever they've added in their heads. And so it's just these tiny little points of our subconsciouses that are connecting. And I'm so aware of everything that didn't make it to their subconscious that I get bummed out. So that was my turning point when I was like, nothing's going to make me happy. So these reviews, I don't need to be involved.
What was the podcast?
Oh, it's Plot Trysts. They've been
Ah, I
very
knew it.
supportive.
I knew
Yeah,
it. I knew it was plot twist. I've been listening to them for like 2 years already. So yeah, I was thinking like you were talking like it was probably plot twist because they really are good at reviewing things, but they don't hold back like if they have any issues
they
or
don't,
yeah.
which I love. I do. I listen to their episodes. I was a listener first, and I really appreciate it. Sometimes I'm like, I don't have time to read these, or I'm not in a headspace to read historical romance. But I listen to Plot Trysts episodes
Yeah,
because that way I like know what's going on and what I might like and what I might not like. Sometimes they don't like something and I'm like, I probably would like that. I'm going to pick up this book. But yeah.
exactly. Okay. Well, before I let you go, remind the listeners where they can find you, website, socials, everything else, and again, the release date of your next book.
Yeah, thank you. So, The Widower Without a Will, the last book in the Preston series, comes out October 17th, 2020, and it will be available wherever you purchase books, ebook, and paperback. Okay, and you can find me at my website, www.katherinegrantromance.com. And I'm on Instagram at Katherine_Grant_romance. I'm on Facebook in a multi-author group called the Wanton Wallflowers. We have a lot of fun in there. And then my podcast, The Historical Romance Sampler, is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And there's a new episode every Wednesday with different historical romance authors and occasionally fellow podcasters, like our episode from this past July.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. I love this conversation. I've learned a lot, and my listeners will hopefully learn a lot as well. And good luck with the next release and with the launch party.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. This has been really fun.
Thank you. Bye.
If you like what you hear so far, please consider subscribing and tune in for the next episode. If you have burning questions about writing you'd like to have answered, head to my Instagram page at kkalbabooks and leave me a message. Or use my email k.k.alba.books@gmail.com. If you'd like your favorite author to answer your question on my show, again, head to my Instagram or email me to let me know which author you'd like me to invite, and I'll try to get over my anxiety and do it. On the other hand, if you're an author who's published at least one book, traditional or indie, and you'd like to become a guest, well, you know what to do by now. Message me and let's get to know each other.